Chapter 1848, Rebirth Through Dripping Blood. Gao Changkong is the number one person Deng Shintong must defeat. The two have not fought each other for a long time, and the 3 years have allowed them to make great progress in their respective fields. Deng Shintong has successfully entered the realm of Epsilon. He understands in his heart that his talent is not as good as Gao Changkong's, and it is only in this place, a place that can bring the two of their supernatural abilities to the same level, that he has a chance to defeat Gao Changkong. Your ability reincarnation theory can only be used once a day. But before me, you have already experienced the battle against the Mechanical Legion and the previous trial battle. I don't believe that your ability will not be activated that time. So this time, with your ability nullified, I'd like to see how you can win me. With a wave of his hand, the world was reshaped. The great Sumeru illusion created light, leaving the entire world Gao Changkong was in with only pure, white light. Sight was taken away. Then through synesthesia, his sense of sight affected his hearing, sense of smell, sense of taste and even his sense of touch. When a person is blind, their combat effectiveness is inevitably greatly weakened. Gao Changkong knew the abilities Deng Shintong possessed, so from the very beginning of entering the battlefield, he chose to close his eyes. The combat uniform has radar detection capabilities, which can be used to determine the movement of surrounding objects, and can capture the location of Deng Shintong and the angle of the attack. It has to be said that this time Deng Shintong guessed correctly, Gao Changkong's abilities having already been used in the previous battle. It wasn't that he didn't want to hide his incompetence, but in the previous battle, he had faced the third position in the Fremon's pantheon, Luna Chernobog. If he had dared to hold back even slightly, he would have been mercilessly strangled by the opponent. It should be said that apart from those entourage Zhang Yi brought with him, none of the remaining people on this battlefield were easy to deal with. Gao Changkong was a genius rarely seen in the world, but which of the people present was not a genius among millions? As a result, his sudden encounter with Deng Shintong caught him unprepared. Under these circumstances, the impact of visual deprivation can be very significant. Behind Gao Changkong, a huge roulette wheel appeared, and one after another, stones formed by the materialization of Sanskrit mantras floated behind him. Gao Changkong's right hand opened. Sun Will Seal. The golden Sun Will sword appeared in the palm of his hand. Akala Seal. The armor of Akala was worn on his body to protect his physique. Deng Shintong had already killed to the front, staring at Gao Changkong and forgetting the anger in his heart. His eyes were focused at this moment, for he knew that this might be the only chance in his life to defeat Gao Changkong and wash away his humiliation. The Western-style sword struck out. Celestial eclipse. An invisible mirror appeared densely in the sky, enveloping the entire world around it. The moment Deng Shintong's sword struck out, a beautiful and peerless silver four-pointed star bloomed to the left of Gao Changkong. The attack was launched at the speed of light, and with the help of an invisible light and shadow reflection in the air, it could achieve the distance of crossing space to attack. The four-pointed star went straight for Gao Changkong's left temple, aiming to take his life with a single blow. The two sides knew each other too well to relax for even a moment, as they knew that would be certain death. There was no need to test, so the move was a killing move. Gao Changkong felt a strong sense of impending doom blooming on the left side of his head. The armor formed by the Akala seal also quietly cracked without a sound, unable to block this stunning attack. Deng Shintong, as the heir to a famous noble family in the Huashu Kingdom, had attended prestigious high schools since childhood. He had followed in the footsteps of his family's hopes, and had studied under first-class teachers in the humanities, history, social skills, languages, combat, and swordsmanship. And the weapon he chose to learn was mainly the Western sword. This kind of swordsmanship is the simplest and most direct, and it is also extremely entertaining to watch. Unlike the ancient swords of the Huashu Kingdom, the swords in martial arts are used off-center, and the tips are not used because they are fragile. However, the sharpest edge of a Western sword can only be used to stab. And this technique can kill an enemy. Deng Shintong's move Celestial Eclipse also perfectly exploits the advantages of the Western sword, and there is only one word for it: fast. Gao Changkong's pupils contracted slightly. He held his sword in his right hand, and there was no time to block the attack, which deliberately targeted his left temple. So he simply raised his left arm to block it. He was wearing the heavy Fudomyo armor, and his body was like that of a heavy machine gunner. The manifested armor was a golden yellow color and enveloped his entire body. His wrists were even more integrated with offense and defense. The strength of the wrist armor was the highest, and it could withstand collisions and slashes. Dang! The sharpness of this sword stroke pierced Gao Changkong's wrist armor, which was not completely blocked, but it also bounced off its original trajectory. The wrist armor could be seen to shatter and then collapse. The sword behind the four-pointed star swept past Gao Changkong's scalp, and the helmet of his combat suit on his head was cut off. Gao Changkong took the opportunity to adjust his body. He looked at Deng Shintong in the distance and took a deep breath. It seems that you haven't just set foot in Epsilon. The rich are just that, rich. Even if they don't have any talent, they can still catch up to others with the help of their family. TSK. Gao Changkong deliberately said this in a tone of voice. He knew what Deng Shintong cared about the most, and it was none other than his family background. This seemingly complimentary but actually derogatory remark was meant to throw Deng Shintong off balance. However, Deng Shintong was no longer the Deng Shintong of the past. After hearing Gao Changkong's words, he simply adjusted his fencing stance while saying indifferently, "My family background, like your talent, was bestowed upon me by heaven. Since heaven has given it to me, I will use it with peace of mind. Why not?" As soon as he finished speaking, Gao Changkong suddenly sprang into action. A huge phantom lion appeared on his body, a lion with 9 heads and a mane of thick hair on its head, looking awe-inspiring and awe-inspiring. Roar! A huge roar spread out in front of him like a trumpet, and Deng Shintong's movement, which was about to attack, suddenly slowed down. He felt like his head was placed inside a big bell, and then hundreds of monks were vigorously ringing the bell outside. His head was about to explode. Deng Shintong was stunned for an instant, and Gao Changkong struck. Holding the Sunwell sword in his hand, he soared from the spot like a hawk, and in an instant, there was only a shadow that the naked eye could not catch, which came straight at Deng Shintong. The speed was unimaginable, and the sword in his hand ruthlessly slashed at Deng Shintong's waist. Deng Shintong's head was buzzing, and he was unable to effectively counterattack at this time. But Gao Changkong's attack was already close at hand, and he knew that he could only escape at this moment. So Deng Shintong really turned into light. He instantly disappeared from his original location. Gao Changkong's long sword attack landed in the void, destroying the entire earth with a single strike. In the next moment, Deng Shintong appeared in a field 1,000 meters away. He raised his hand, and the ability of Holy Body Blessing activated, blocking the sweeping energy and splashing debris with the power of light. His mind also slowly returned to clarity. Celestial Eclipse is not just swordplay, it should more properly be described as a field-based ability. An invisible mirror of light is set up in an area, and then Deng Shintong's attacks can reach anywhere within the area in an instant. This also includes Deng Shintong's body, which can turn into light. Therefore, within this area, Deng Shintong can complete teleportation. Gao Changkong's attack missed, and Deng Shintong's head regained clarity. It was his turn to attack in the next round. The Celestial Eclipse sword strike once again struck Gao Changkong, and the silver 4-pointed star shone resplendently in the sky, enveloping Gao Changkong's body. The feeling of being pricked on the skin returned, and Gao Changkong felt as if someone was pointing a Western sword at his eyes. Unable to use the reincarnation theory of the meditation seal, and deprived of his sight, he was at a huge disadvantage from the start. He hastily drew his sword and swept out with the sharpness of the Sunwell sword, and golden light bloomed. The power of gold and silver interweaved, collided, and annihilated in the sky. Deng Shintong crouched low, transformed into a ruthless killing machine, and quickly used the power of Celestial Eclipse to move around in midair, before unleashing his sword skills from time to time. Gao Changkong was unable to accurately determine Deng Shintong's location, and the level of their supernatural powers had been brought to the same level. it would be extremely unwise to recklessly use a wide-range attack. So there was nothing he could do, and he could only stand back and fend off Deng Shintong's attacks again and again. He had learned his lesson. Although he could not attack Deng Shintong's attacks were limited to the words unexpected and fast. As long as Gao Changkong concentrated on narrowing the circle of his defenses and stabilizing his own form, it would be difficult for Deng Shintong to quickly break through his defenses. "Perhaps we can talk." This time it was Deng Shintong who spoke first. He was merciless in his attacks and left no room for compromise, but he spoke as if they had been old friends for years. "You rebelled against Blizzard City, and you did so purely to take revenge for yourself. The culprit is Zhu Zheng and the power group behind him. Back then, you were just an investigation squad captain, not someone who could make others defect. But now you are different, you are already a mutant of the Black Chariot level. If you are willing to defect, perhaps I can help you bring down Zhu Zheng." Deng Shintong's words were true and false, just like those of Gao Changkong before, only to disrupt the other person's ability to think, and allow loopholes in their offense and defense. Gao Changkong raised the corner of his mouth. "You? Nowadays, you are just a dog under Zhang Yi's command. Who are you to talk to me?" Deng Shintong's face did not show any anger. "Zhang Yi is strong enough, so I am willing to be his partner. I don't mind being called a dog. After all, the relationship between partners is no different from the weak becoming the dog of the strong. So, even if you don't want to be my dog, how about becoming Zhang Yi's dog?" As he spoke, two huge silver four-pointed stars burst from the tip of his sword and appeared to the left and right of Gao Changkong the next moment. They bloomed around Gao Changkong like the moon around the sun, dazzling and bright, silver like the blade of a sword, ready to slice him up. Gao Changkong's left hand formed the seal of the urn with one hand, raised high above his head, and absorbed both attacks. "That's a really good suggestion, Deng Shintong." But, his tone suddenly rising, his tone full of mockery, "What I, Gao Changkong, have done is not to be someone's dog." The poodle launched another attack, a huge roar sweeping in all directions from Gao Changkong's center. Deng Shintong quickly retreated, wary. "But you alone cannot take Blizzard City." He stared at Gao Changkong. "You have already been labeled a traitor. The moment you set foot in the Huashu Kingdom, everyone will want to kill you. You won't even be able to get to the gates of Blizzard City before you're probably dead. You're not Zhang Yi, and without the help of the state apparatus, there are many things you simply cannot do. Not to mention that Zhu Zheng already has someone by his side who can deal with you." The corner of Gao Changkong's mouth curled up slightly. "You mean that little girl cultivated in that artificial womb? Ha, I've heard her story." "Perhaps you're right, Deng Shintong. My abilities are limited, and there are many things I may never be able to accomplish in my lifetime. But you don't understand, people like you never understand what people like me really want." Gao Changkong's tone was full of mockery. How could someone born with a silver spoon be expected to understand the thoughts of someone like him, who had once been on the verge of ruin? If only Zhang Yi were standing across from him today. He would definitely understand what I'm thinking. Gao Changkong's mind came up with this thought. What was the difference between him and Zhang Yi? In fact, it was just a matter of one having succeeded and the other having failed. Gao Changkong fell into calm thought. After losing his greatest advantage reincarnation theory, his own combat effectiveness has been reduced by at least 30%. The advantage of intelligence and the anticipation of the opponent's attack are of paramount importance. Right now, he must fight for his life with the opponent through sheer strength in an absolutely fair state. His ability allows him to teleport within a certain range, and even his attacks are instantaneous. However, neither teleportation nor instantaneity is truly without time lag. It's more like Zhang Yi's, where he constructs doors within the area and then uses the doors to move himself and shift his attacks. Because every time he attacks, there are a few milliseconds of time left for me to react. I have determined the location of his doors, but this prediction has been wrong several times in a row. In other words, he can move the position of the doors. Writing down the position of the doors, and thus predicting his attacks is obviously ineffective. Gao Changkong had to fight many times in a row before he could figure this out. He already had a plan in mind. The area of his domain is not very large, probably only about 2 kilometers in radius. But the range of his praise of light is very wide, and maintaining a long-lasting light shroud consumes a lot of supernatural energy. I guess he can't maintain his ability for long. So what I have to do is, get out of this area. Deng Shintong's ability is not good at long-distance attacks. Once he had figured this out, Gao Changkong's feet finally started moving when Deng Shintong's sword skills once again attacked. He swung the golden sacred sword in his hands to slash and shatter the silver 4-pointed star, and then he suddenly exerted his legs and, like a lion, charged towards the distance. Seeing Gao Changkong fleeing at high speed, Deng Shintong obviously froze for a moment. This guy ran away? But soon Deng Shintong understood what Gao Changkong's actions meant. No, he's just buying time and using the opportunity to get out of my territory. The rules of the game are that life and death are the boundaries, and the game will only end when at least one person from both sides dies. So even if one person hides and buys enough time for the other to die of old age, they will still be considered the winner. After Gao Changkong escaped, Deng Shintong had to go after him. Either he chose the same method and converged his own domain of praise of light, and continued to waste time with Gao Changkong in a meaningless way. Deng Shintong could not catch up to Gao Changkong. He could only teleport within his own small area. But when it came to a foot race, he was no match for Gao Changkong. Before the end of the world, the other party was a world-class basketball superstar, and it seems that many people have forgotten that his physical fitness was already world-class. And after becoming a mutant, his previous advantages would only be infinitely magnified. Firing up his supernatural powers to fight, applying his intelligent mind was his hobby, while physical fitness was his specialty. Gao Changkong was quickly moving away from the area. Images began to appear in his eyes. As long as he stayed away from Deng Shintong, the effect of being influenced by the praise of light would gradually weaken. Deng Shintong was in no hurry to chase after him, and the distance between the two of them was getting wider and wider. They were both weighing up how the next battle should be fought in order to successfully kill their opponent. The battlefield where King Arthur had descended was a desolate ancient battlefield, full of broken swords, burning chariots, and damaged battle flags. His enemy, however, had laughed wildly at the very beginning of their encounter. This battlefield is truly wonderful. The voluptuous woman spread her arms, and her blood-red hair flowed down her head like a waterfall, extending all the way to the curve of her buttocks. Even in the face of King Arthur, who had conquered Europe, her smile was still wanton and unrestrained, not giving the enemy in front of her the slightest regard. Hela, King Arthur muttered the name of his opponent. His opponent, Hela, the Grim Reaper of the Asgard, an organization of mutants allied with Europa. As mutants from the same continent, the two were no strangers to each other and had crossed paths many times. When they met here, King Arthur did not hesitate to raise his sword. No matter who you are going to die here. Because the only one who can go all the way is King Arthur. Hela looked up at the sky, not giving King Arthur the slightest bit of respect. Her heart was filled with excitement, because she knew the rules of the battlefield like the back of her hand. If they met in the outside world, she might even be killed in seconds by the other party. But here, everyone is on the same level, so she becomes invincible. Hela coldly gave King Arthur a look. King Arthur, it is your misfortune to meet me today. No matter how strong you are, you will definitely lose. King Arthur heard Hela's arrogant words and just smiled faintly, but his gaze was extremely cold. He doesn't like to waste time talking nonsense with his enemies. The sword passed down in the Levant family in his hands radiated a brilliant light. The power manifested in him turned the sword into the radiant Excalibur. Excalibur. King Arthur's sword swept towards Hela, and the surging energy released from the tip of the sword enveloped the entire space in front of him. Hela narrowed her eyes, and her body slowly turned a blood-red color. Her hair twisted and extended like a viper, even longer than her body. Facing King Arthur's sword, she chose to directly resist with her body. She was like a female monster, her arms protecting her body as the sword approached and crashed down. After a moment, in front of King Arthur, a long, obvious groove appeared in the ground, the path left by the sword. Hela had long since disappeared. Using your body to block the tip of my sword is a sure way to die. King Arthur's ability, King's authority, represented the supreme authority of the king, and in front of him, it indiscriminately weakened all of the enemy's strength. The broken steel sword meant that it could destroy gold and jade, and it could weaken the enemy's defenses. This was the purest and most useful ability. Hela had actually tried to use her body to block it, so naturally it was difficult to stop it. But soon, King Arthur heard a seductive laugh in his ear. Ha! Ha! Something red was wriggling on the ground. King Arthur looked down and saw blood beads rapidly coalescing into clots, which finally combined into a hole. Hela's figure emerged from the blood clot, restoring her original appearance. At this time, she was almost naked, with a long dress made from her red hair covering her curvy body. Hela, the Asgardian god of death, had another name before she joined Asgard, Bloody Mary. This was one of her abilities, she could regenerate from her wounds. It was said that on the battlefield, she would never die unless her last drop of blood was extinguished. Even after being slashed into countless pieces by King Arthur, Hela still gave him a wild and unrestrained smile after she resurrected. King Arthur, you can't kill me. Because I am the god in charge of death. A dark light flashed in King Arthur's eyes. So, this is your trump card, is it? Being able to regenerate from blood loss is indeed a very powerful ability, meaning that it is extremely difficult to kill. After all, at this time, the level of supernatural power of both sides is on the same level. King Arthur could crush Hela's body, but it would be absolutely impossible for him to kill all her cells at once. Hela looked at King Arthur and showed off her figure in front of him. King Arthur, from the moment you met me, you have already lost. The rules here are that you have to kill your opponent to win. And I cannot be killed by you at this time. So, no matter how strong you are, no matter how talented you are, you absolutely cannot defeat me.